Good evening, everybody. This is the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com. Happy to be with you on Thursday, the 28th day of December, as we get close to the change in the new year, going from 2017 into 2018. We're going to get a little bit of what I spoke about yesterday towards the end of the show, when we talk about the feeling of it being a new year, new me. How silly that sounds. We'll reiterate those points that were made yesterday. Lots of stuff to get into today. We're going to talk a little bit about some issues going on with steroids in baseball and how I make the comparisons to amphetamines. All that a little later. But before we get into that, I'm happy to be joined by a good friend of the program, a man that has his own program called Open Mic. He's been doing it for very many years, touches on baseball and football, and I've been a guest on his show as well, and that's Michael Cohen. Mike, John Pielli over in New Jersey, appreciate you having a couple minutes.
South Jersey and North Jersey now collide. How you doing, John?
Yeah, I was thinking of like the 101.5 traffic reports, when they go from like South Jersey to North Jersey with the traffic. This is a little bit of, South Jersey meets North Jersey.
A little bit. Let's head up 287 south, or head up 287 north, or go down south. However you want to call it, I-95. That's what it is.
All right, Mike, so we're going to get into some NFL talk right now. The first thing I was thinking about right now, because I know how passionately you follow the Jets year in and year out, I think there could be a couple positives in regards to what has gone on this season. That being said, your take on the 2017 New York Jets season?
I mean, it's been a season where a lot of people have accepted mediocrity and, I don't want to say failure, but just pure mediocrity. I mean, this team, the bar was set so low for this team, it was ridiculous. You had people saying the team was going to win nothing. Some people were saying they're going to win one or two games. And even the Jets were giving themselves a pass for what was coming this season. And they boxed themselves into a situation here. We'll get to that in a minute. 5-11, I mean, because they're not going to win this week against the Patriots. Forget about the Patriots going from home field advantage to the playoffs. And they think the game will be over after the first quarter. Probably 55-0 at the halftime with the Patriots in front. But, I mean, it's been a season of mediocrity in a lot of ways for the Jets. There have been some moments. They did beat the Bills on Thursday night. They had a nice game against the Dolphins early in the year. They had a nice three-game winning streak at the start of the year. One of those wins, of course, was against the Browns, so there's a bit of a caveat there. And there's also been moments of abject misery and failure, with them not showing up for Tampa Bay, not showing up for Denver at all, where they get shut out 23-0, blowing fourth-quarter leads to Miami, where they're up 2 touchdowns on the road to Miami, and they blow that game. They blow a game against Carolina, blow a game against Atlanta, blow a game against New England. I mean, it's been a really weird team to figure out. I think that's really the pulse that I have for the season, is that you really can't figure out where this team is. And now going into the offseason, they're in a position where they have to make a lot of big decisions about their head coach, about their general manager, whether they want to keep those two guys together, whether they want to separate them going into next season, and then start to figure out what they want to do with the quarterback position. So it's been a weird season, for that matter, for the Jets.
I'll tell you, the one thing that I compare it to Charlie Brown. Because if you look at the way this season was supposed to unfold, it looked like things were going to be a lot worse. This was going to be one of the worst teams in the league. And it's like they dragged you in a little bit. It's like Lucy holding the football for Charlie Brown. They made you think that, maybe they're a little bit better than what they are on paper. And you saw a lot of positive things from the play of the quarterback, Robbie Anderson, emerging. Safarian Jenkins has played pretty well. Obviously, the two guys in the secondary that they drafted have had very good seasons. So a lot has gone right to just drag you to a point where you start to believe. You're like, all right, maybe they could do this. Maybe they could beat a New Orleans. Maybe they could beat a Carolina. Maybe they could beat the Patriots in the first matchup of the season. So all these things where you thought coming into the season there was no chance they were ever going to have a chance to win any of these games. All of a sudden you believed, and as soon as you believed, they pulled the rug right out from under you and lost those games in heartbreaking fashion. All 3 of those games, they should have very well won based off of the play on the field.
I mean, take a look at the Carolina game, for example. When they had a lead in the fourth quarter, they came back. They were down in that game, came all the way back. I think the lead was 22-21. I think, or was it 25-21? Whatever the lead was, I can't remember exactly the score. But the fact is, there was a point in the game. Forget the Osfarian-Jenkins touchdown. That should have been a touchdown. The officials called back. But there was a point in the game where the Jets had Panthers stopped. It was 4th down and 2. And then they get called for the roughing the passer penalty. That's just a case in point of a lot of the problems that this team has had all year. There's a lack of discipline. A lot of that attributed to the fact they have a lot of young players who maybe not that great. Maybe guys who are not going to be here next year or 2 years from now. But also it's on the head coach because it's been a problem for that team all year. I mean, they're one of the most penalized teams in the National Football League. They average 7.3 penalties per game. That's a high for that franchise. Certainly in the last 15 years, they haven't been penalized that much in a very, very long time per game. So they've had a lot of disciplinary problems on the field. You go back to the Miami game where Robbie Anderson lost his head and he throws his helmet across the field. I mean, there's been a lot of meltdowns at the end of the games that have both attributed to young, inexperienced poor play and also on the head coach for not getting this team ready and adjust when situations call for it.
I tell you look at the coach, Todd Bowles, and the way he stands out in regards to press conferences. He seems very to himself, doesn't provide a lot of information, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, you look at Bill Belichick, he's given no information for years, but the only difference, he goes out there and his team wins Super Bowls. They're a perennial AFC favorite every single year. So, it's been proven that you don't necessarily have to spill things to the media or be loud and boisterous and, antagonistic and, call your players out in front of the media. So I don't think that's necessarily a way that it has to be. But you put together Todd Bowles' quietness in front of the media and the perception that maybe he is not a strong enough leader or may not hold his players accountable. Last year you had the issues with Sheldon Richardson and Brandon Marshall. This year the issues with Muhammad Wilkerson, and early in the season with Sheldon Richardson before he was traded. I start to get the sense, and I don't know if you feel the same way, that maybe the coach doesn't have a handle on the players and really, for whatever reason, may not be holding the players to the accountability that they need to be held to, which, by the way, probably leads to your point about the amount of penalties that they're committing each and every game.
There was a point in the offseason where Todd Bowles was asked about the discipline on the football team and about players being late for meetings, and he said it wasn't a problem. Now all of a sudden it's a problem around here with Muhammad Wilkerson, a guy they can't control anymore, and they basically have done what the Giants just did just the other day with Eli Apple. He's basically been suspended by the team the rest of the season, and they're going to cut him before the new league year begins in March in order to save money on the cap. Otherwise, they get hit like, I believe, $16.5 million on the salary cap. So they're going to have to cut him. So it's those kind of things of not leveraging the discipline when you need to do it for the start of the season. Yes, the culture's changed. Yes, it's a better locker room than it was last year with divisive players like Brandon Marshall and Ryan Fitzpatrick and Sheldon Richardson in the locker room. Those guys are going, yes, it's a better culture. That's the standpoint. But there's still some drama there. And it's certainly an issue that has to be looked upon, certainly by ownership, certainly by general manager Mike McCagnon when they're sitting down here this week and thinking about what they want to do moving forward.
I look at two things, and I got two more Jeff points for you right here. The first one is in regards to the talent that's on the field. And going back to what we both agreed to about what I said originally, we were talking about the lack of talent on this team. This was by no means mistaken for a team that should have been expected to go to the Super Bowl this year. How much do you judge the talent that's on the field when you are also looking at the coach as far as him being a long-term fixture on this team? If you have players that, let's say, just don't necessarily have the talent of the other teams that are around you, competing against you week after week, are you a little more inclined to give the coach a little bit more of a pass?
I mean, that's a great question because they're clearly, every team they face this year that is much better than they are, talent-wise. But they've been in lot of these games. They've been in a lot of close games. You mentioned the New Orleans game. That was a close game. They gave the Saints a lot of problems in that game. So they play tough. They play hard. So you have to evaluate that. You have to keep that in mind too. They do play for the coach every week, even though they do make a lot of mistakes. At the same time, I also look at the development of a lot of young players. How they move, how they developed over the course of the last year. In some cases, some of the guys 2 years. Now, the one that stands out is the quarterback position, and that has been a problem.
That's been a disaster.
Develop a young quarterback. Bryce Petty has been a disaster. Christian Hackenberg has never seen the field. That's a problem with the head coach. That's a mark against Todd Bowles and Mike McCagnon. At the same time, you have guys like Robbie Anderson who have developed nicely. You have a guy like Jamal Adams, who I think will eventually be a really, really good player in this league. He had a pretty good year his first year. Marcus May did okay his first year. But for the most part, it's really a mixed bag with the way the young players have been. So it's a tough situation. My thing is this, John. If I'm the owner, if I'm the general manager, I'm looking at this thing, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I'm going to go into the next year with Todd Bowles as my head coach, is he my head coach 3 years from now? If the answer is no, if I don't feel he can be my head coach 3 years from now, I have to move on.
That leads me perfectly into my next point. And once again, I'm joined by Michael Cohen from Open Mic. You can obviously catch his program, and he'll have a little bit of chance to talk and remind the listeners of the best way to catch that in a little bit. But it's leading me to my last point. If Todd Bowles isn't your head coach, I understand we're coming into a weekend where Black Monday should be a little more of a big deal than normal. As many as maybe 6 to 8, possibly 10 teams could be changing head coaches as the season ends this year. In your mind, for a guy that follows the Jets day in and day out, is there a coach in your mind that you think would be ideal for this Jets roster, the way it's constructed, as they are getting ready to prepare for the next offseason and the draft?
That's part of the issue, because there is no ideal candidate out there. I mean, whether you're the Jets, whether you're the Giants, whether even your team, the Tennessee Titans, if they lose this week, I don't know if Mike Mularkey is going to be safe either. There's really no ideal candidate out there for a head coach. You're talking about guys like, Josh McDaniels. I don't think anybody wants to see him in New York, considering his problems as a head coach. You talking about Mike Smith, who was a decent head coach in Atlanta. I don't know. He may end up being the Giants head coach. You're talking about guys like, I heard Mike Shula's name being thrown out there, offensive coordinator of the Panthers, for a potential job maybe with even the Giants for that matter. So there's no real ideal candidate. There's no Bill Cowher, there's no John Gruden out there. Those guys are not coming out of retirement to coach on the sidelines for the Jets or the Giants or anybody for that matter, unless they get thrown a lot of money and they pretty much guaranteed quarterback, like a Tom Brady, be their quarterback. Otherwise they're not going back into the game. So you're looking at another coordinator. And for that matter, I don't know who that guy would be. An interesting thing here, John, last thing on the Jets, Todd Bowles may make the decision for the Jets themselves, because he could end up going to the Cardinals if Bruce Arians does retire.
Yeah, I did hear that. I did hear from perspective from Arizona that that's something that they haven't confirmed that they would be interested in from anybody in the organization. But number one, Bruce Arians is still their head coach, so I wouldn't expect to hear them speak on the matter. And number two, Todd Bowles is still under contract with the Jets, so there's no opening yet. So, it's something that obviously makes sense because of his ties to Arizona. So I would believe if they were changing direction in regards to head coach, maybe Bruce Arians retires. Maybe they decide to part ways with him after another disappointing season. Obviously, it's hard to expect a lot out of you when you lose your franchise quarterback. It seems like every year with them. But listen, I think that would be an interesting predicament, because if you're the Jets, maybe you consider if there's a desire from another organization to bring your coach in. Number one, you start talking about compensation, and number two, you start to think, hey, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. Maybe this is a sign that, hey, the future might not be so great. It's time to, maybe this is a decision that's being made for ourselves. Kind of like you just said, I think of the Blue Jays and John Farrell, when he was their manager, and they were lukewarm in regards to their desire to bring him back the next season. All of a sudden, the Boston Red Sox fired Bobby Valentine. There was an opening, And yeah, the Blue Jays said, hey, this is probably the time to part ways with this guy. So, if Arizona is interested, I could see that would be a very good way to help the Jets out and kind of make the decision for them.
Let me ask you a question. What would you do if you were Woody Johnson? If you just shave your head, go full Woody Johnson there, and what would you do if you had to make the decision?
I got to be honest. If I have a gun put to my head and said, hey, it's up to me, I let this off season play out and let him stick around another year, even if it's in a lame duck type of situation. I get your point in regards to, is this guy the coach going forward 4 or 5 years? I don't think anybody can look right into the camera or into the eyes of the other person and believe that with 100% confidence. But the Jets, the way they're sitting right now, I think they have overachieved a little bit. So some of that does have to do with the coaching. Where they're going to be positioned in the draft. This draft is going to be very big for them on both sides of the football. So maybe I go with Maccagnan and with Bowles into this draft with the thought, maybe not saying it publicly, hey, this is your last shot. Let's show enough progress this year to believe that we're building towards something good. And if not, that's it. And you know what? I bet you, and I'll add this other point in there, Mike, the fact that so many different teams are going to change head coaches, and I guarantee you out of the 4 out of 8 or 5 out of 10, they're going to make bad hires in regards to the next series of head coaches. Because, we've both spoken about this, that next big-time head coach isn't out there. He's not coming from the college ranks. I mean, a prestigious job as a head coach of a college football team is outweighing the prestige of being an NFL head coach. Those coaches that are great in college kind of just want to stay there. So it's, you're making a choice of somebody that's been around the league a little bit and has failed as a head coach, or a big-time coordinator. So you're looking at situations where neither have necessarily been proven to work. And most importantly, that guy to take over and lead the franchise in the next direction is not there right now. Maybe 12 months from now, that candidate might be there.
Maybe. And that's a point I definitely agree with you a lot on, because there is no great candidate out there right now. And I do think that ultimately they're going to end up keeping Bowles. My concern is this. If you're going to bring in a young quarterback, let's just say they go out there and draft, Frank Mayfield with the 8th pick in the draft. And it's a total meltdown. They go 4-12, then you change head coaches, you change coordinators now. What does that do to the young quarterback who you, quote-unquote, believe is going to be your franchise guy? So it puts a real negative spin on a lot of things. That's why I sometimes think it's better just to reshuffle the deck. If you really believe that one of these young kids out there is going to be your franchise quarterback, or you're going to go out there and sign Kirk Cousins, you don't want to have these constant changes all the time going on. Now a year after you decide to make all these moves.
Now, good point. And I tell you can look at the situation with the Rams and Jared Goff with the new coach there, Sean McVay. All of a sudden, you have an offensive-minded coach that connects with the quarterback, and he wasn't the coach that was there when the guy was drafted. So there are examples of bringing in the right guy, and obviously if the Jets chose to make a change somewhere down the road, whether it's this year or next year, they would probably be looking for a guy that was probably more offensive-oriented, kind of similar to the way a lot of teams have gone. But moving forward, and I'm joined, of course, by Mike Cohen, host of Open Mic. Looking at the teams that are out there getting ready to perform in the postseason in a couple weeks, what team would you think is the biggest surprise? Give me one from the NFC and one from the AFC.
Boy, biggest surprise, I think out of the NFC, the easy pick would be to say the Los Angeles Rams, but I'm going to say the Minnesota Vikings, because here's a team that really has not had a big quarterback in any of the years that, in any of these recent years here that Mike Zimmer has been the head coach. He's had Teddy Bridgewater. He had that horrible incident with Bridgewater where he had the knee injury that almost ended his career. Then you have Sam Bradford, who was nothing special, and then you go to Case Keenum, of all people. And now Case Keenum is lighting up, and he's got that team at 12-3 right now. I don't think anybody ever would have, in their wildest dreams, thought that the Vikings would have won this division happen. If you told me in September that Case Keenum would be the quarterback for more than almost three quarters of the season, I would have thought the Vikings were 6-10. So they to me are the biggest surprise of anybody to be in this position where they not only have a chance to have a bye week in the playoffs, they have a chance to have home field still.
No, absolutely. Let me throw one caveat in there too, Mike. Dalvin Cook getting lost in the second week of the season. You know, I couldn't imagine that team being able to make up for that loss. You know, star young running back, obviously on their third quarterback. So yeah, you know, good point right there.
I would say Minnesota in the NFC. In the AFC, I'm going to say Jacksonville from the standpoint that I don't think anybody thought they were ready to explode now. A lot of people looked down at Blake Bortles and they thought he wasn't the answer. And he may still not be the answer moving forward for them, but I don't think anybody thought their defense was ready to light it up the way they have. I don't think anybody thought that Leonard Fournette was ready to become one of the top backs in the league. A lot of people thought he'll be good this year. I don't think anybody thought he'll be one of the top 5 backs in the NFL would be a difference maker for them so quickly. So they are surprised in that matter on turning things around so quickly. I think that was a situation with Jacksonville with Tom Coughlin coming in and coming into the front office and Doug Marrone on the sidelines, that it would take a couple of years for them to get that thing turned around again. That happened really quicker than anybody thought.
Yeah, and I'll tell you look at the performance of their defense, it's very quiet because you don't think of the star caliber players on their defense. Obviously, some of them have names. Some of them will be going to the Pro Bowl and maybe be all pro players. But, you know, the Jacksonville defense seems week after week is keeping that team in the game. And obviously Blake Bortles has had some moments this year where he's done okay. But I tell you, if they had a top quarterback, they would be my favorite in the AFC right now based off of the way the entire team has played this year.
Absolutely. I mean, they would be. They're a dangerous team going into this thing. I mean, they kind of remind me a little bit of the Ravens. Now, I'm not going to compare them to the 2000 Ravens because that's not fair at all. But I'm talking about like recent Ravens teams we've seen, like in 2011 that won the Super Bowl. Just a good, solid defense and an offense that just does good and just does enough. If you put them on the road in Pittsburgh or New England, not saying that Jacksonville's going to win those games because I don't think they will, but they're going to have a chance. You know, the defense does travel very well, especially in cold cities on the road in the playoffs.
In your mind, Mike, is there anybody that can get in the way of us seeing a New England, Pittsburgh AFC championship again?
Honestly, the only team that I would say that could get in the way is maybe Kansas City. Realistically, Kansas City. But I just don't see it. I think we're going to see Pittsburgh, New England in the AFC championship game.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, I think that's what we're looking at, too. I mean, I think Jacksonville can play good enough defense to maybe stay in one of these games and make a game close. But, you know, then again, you know, I'm looking at Pittsburgh and New England, and, you know, I can't see the Steelers ever winning a game in Foxborough, even though, you know, a couple weeks ago it looked like it was a game that they were pretty close to winning.
Well, I'll say this about Pittsburgh. I mean, they have one of the top offenses in the National Football League, and with all the talent they have on that football team, nothing would surprise me if they went in there and won. The Patriots are a good football team, and I'm picking them to win the Super Bowl again for the second straight year. But I look at that Patriots team. I see a team that has a lot of faults. What happened in Pittsburgh a couple weeks ago is certainly a great example. Not showing up on a Monday night the week before that in Miami, and even against Buffalo last week, you know, it took them really almost an entire half, 3 quarters to get rolling offensively. They were losing that game at one point in the third quarter, 16-13 at Buffalo. So they're not a perfect team. And if Pittsburgh goes in there, I know their defense has got a lot of problems, especially in the pass defense for Pittsburgh. But if they can protect the football and they can keep Ben Roethlisberger upright, they're going to have a chance in that football game against the Patriots. I really think they have a chance.
No, I believe they do too. Once again, John Pielli joined by Mike Cohen. The James Harrison thing, you know, he ends up leaving, being cut by the Steelers, signs with the Patriots, but obviously a big media storm in regards to former teammates ripping Harrison, saying that, you know, he was just, for lack of a better word, a lousy teammate this year. He was brought in there pretty much to be a leader. He refused to lead. Every time he was inactive, he would just walk out and just separated himself from the team. What's your thoughts on the Harrison situation, how it was handled in Pittsburgh, and the thoughts of any impact he could have on the Patriots going into the playoffs?
I mean, I don't know what kind of impact he can have on the team moving forward. I mean, he can make a big play. I mean, he'll have a big play in a playoff game against Pittsburgh, and that would shut up a lot of people in Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
sure. But you know, that was a really weird situation. He's certainly, if you read a lot of comments from people in Pittsburgh who cover the team, he's really been on the downside of his career. He's not the player he once was. He's pushing 40 years old. The speed isn't there. He's only had a couple of tackles this year, so I think in a lot of ways he's at the end of the line. And certainly his stats have been going down dramatically over the last 3 or 4 years. But as far as contributing for the Patriots, it's more about intel more than anything else at this point. If he contributes a couple of big plays for New England, then they got their money's worth.
Yeah, I tell you, I'd be surprised. I mean, I think he will probably be suited and dressed for the game against the Jets this week, just so the Patriots have a chance or an opportunity to look with their own eyes and see what they have. But I tell you, if he doesn't show a lot in a couple snaps he gets this week, I wouldn't be surprised if he was inactive in the playoffs. I mean, I don't see a player here as we hit the halfway point of the pass ball show. There's the cuckoo clock. Once again, this is John Pielli. I'm joined by Mike Cohen of Open Mic. You mentioned it in regards to Harrison. He's nowhere near the same player that he was years ago. I don't think he could be trusted on a top unit to make big plays. Maybe he can make a big play. But I tell you, I think there's a little bit of an audition with him this week to kind of show that he still has something, still has enough that the Patriots could trust them to put a uniform on him in a playoff game.
We'll see what happens. I mean, that's for sure. I don't expect him to do much of anything this week. But I don't think he's going to play much at all. I mean, they may get a few snaps. So, I mean, you could be a cynic and say he's going to have an interception of Bryce Petty and go 99 yards for a touchdown like he did in the Super Bowl against the Cardinals. That's not going to happen, of course. But he's going to have limited snaps this week, and we'll see. I think it's more about just sticking to the Steelers more than anything else.
Now, moving along, we're going to talk a little baseball now, and I was talking earlier in the week about the New York Mets and the situation that they're in. Obviously, we're in another one of those fog storms in regards to how much money do they have to spend? Are the owners going broke? Are they just looking to merely turn a profit? Is this a situation where they care more about getting a couple extra dollars to say that things are positive and maybe not care so much about a winning team? That being said, I have made a statement that I don't believe that the Mets offseason, which has not been very busy and may not be expected to be busy, is not necessarily the fault of the general manager right now. I think it is absolutely 100% the ownership's decision. Your thoughts on that?
I agree with you. I think it is 110% the ownership's decision. I've never been a big fan of the Wilpons. This is going back for a while now. I know a lot of people use the Bernie Madoff situation as a big crux for them. Big reason why they were having all these financial issues. But that was over 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And the team has proven in recent years that they are willing to spend some money, i.e. on Cespedes and even David Wright's contract for that matter. So it's not about Bernie Madoff anymore. It's about an ownership that just is plain and simple. It's just cheap. Let's just call it what it is. They're just cheap. And I think they put Sandy Alderson in a position where he can't win. They put certainly their new manager in Mickey Callaway in a position where he can't manage a team that is going to be truly competitive. And it's unfortunate. We see a lot of teams, John, in all leagues where if you want to talk about the decay of a franchise and you can pinpoint to just bad people in the front office, bad people on the sidelines, in the dugout for that matter, guys who just aren't really good at their jobs. In the case of the Mets, it's not any of that. They have good people, good baseball people. They just don't have good owners, and that's their biggest problem right now.
No, it's a shame because you've seen, and I thought Omar Minaya was a little bit better than he got credit for. Bringing him back into the scouting capacity that he's in as an assistant general manager, I really do think will help because that's Omar Minaya's strength, is player development and scouting. So I do think that could help them down the road. That being said, when it comes time and the team needs to be trusted to make a big decision, make a big acquisition. Let's say they roll over this team, which, by the way, 75 home runs that they had last year were traded away from the team before the end of August, and none of that's been replaced. So if this team seems to, or maybe for some reason, with all their pitchers coming back healthy, if that's, maybe from my lips to God's ears, but if that happens and the Mets overachieve in the first half of the season, the thing that sucks the most, the thing that makes me most mad as a fan, is I have no confidence that this ownership group is going to even approve of a trade at the trading deadline for a player that is going to impact this team and maybe put them over the top when they deserve it.
Look at their history. I mean, how many trades has Sandy Alderson made at the deadline? I know outside of Cespedes, there's not many.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really been a team that's kind of been stand pat most of the time at the deadline, and even their off-season moves haven't been that many since he's been the general manager of this team. So it's always been about pinching pennies. I know early on a lot of people said, I guess a lot of people were saying that Sandy wasn't creative enough, but it's all about the Wilpons and about the budget that they want Sandy Alderson to spend. He's only going to spend what ownership tells him. And if they're telling him, we only want to spend $125 million, and you already have a whole bunch of money going to David Wright, you got about $22 million a year going to him, you got another $15 or so million going to Cespedes. Well, now that puts you in a bad position, even worse position right there. So you're already talking like $50 million off the board right there. So now you've got, $85 million left to spend? You know what I'm saying? So it's really a tough position for him to be in.
Yeah, not only that, but you have the star pitchers that are going to start to go through the arbitration process are going to be asking for more and more money, which is deserved. They've done their time. Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, Matt Harvey, even though he's not worth a half at this moment of what he's getting paid, is still going to get paid. So, I mean, you're factoring this in, their payroll will go up. It'll be at a reasonable number, maybe about 135, 140 million as it stands right now. But, that puts them probably in the middle of the pack or in the second, half of the echelon of teams in regards to baseball. More teams are getting close to the luxury tax threshold and are saying, you know what, that's kind of a de facto salary cap now. You've seen a high percentage of teams that are looking at that 189 or as it goes to 190 or 191 over the next couple of years. They're trying to get as close to that number as they can now. And you first it was just the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Giants and the Tigers, a couple teams that were over it and were trying to get under it. But now it seems to be a goal of most teams, or the majority of major market teams are looking to toe their line a little closer to that 189.
Can I address the 3,000-pound gorilla in the room? Because I talked about this on my own show. I wanted to bring it up here.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Yankees in getting Giancarlo Stanton. Now, a lot of people, and even Met fans, got upset saying, well, the Mets should have gone out there and tried to make a trade for Giancarlo Stanton. Other than the obvious, one, that Derek Jeter was not going to trade him within the division, and two, Giancarlo had a no-trade clause, so he probably wasn't going to approve of a trade to the Mets to begin with. The Yankees, you got to give them some credit here, because they're under the cap. They've been smart with their money. They shed payroll by getting rid of a lot of contracts that were dead money, like A-Rod's contract came off the board at the end of last season. So you have all this money that was available to them. Two, you trade Starlin Castro, who had, $21 million owed to him over the next couple of seasons.
Yes.
And now they're trying to find a way to get Johnny Damon to accept a trade somewhere so they can get his contract off the boards. So that team, you got to give them some credit. They've been pretty prudent on how they're spending their money and still going out there and getting some big pieces that can make them winners this year. So while a lot of people, a lot of Met fans for that matter, want to kill the Yankees, and I understand the evil empire and all that stuff, I have to give Brian Cashman some props for the way he spent his money this year.
Number one, he is an excellent general manager. He has put that team year after year, regardless of what the outlook is, regardless of what his budget is in regards to the ownership and what they're telling him he could spend. He goes out there and improves that team every single year. So I wish every team in baseball had a general manager like Brian Cashman, because he's thinking my team first, competitive, going after it, giving yourselves the best chance to win year after year. And obviously as Mets fans, that disgusts us because we wish we wish we knew, number one, that we had the support from ownership, but number two, a general manager that we knew didn't care about what anybody else said, but was going to put a contender on the field regardless. The other thing that I like, and actually I could say maybe I like and don't like in regards to Brian Cashman as the general manager of the Yankees, he is a very good vulture. He is able to hover over every single situation, never rules himself out of anything. But I tell you, when he starts smelling a you-know-what down at the bottom, he jumps in and gets himself involved. He did that a couple of years ago when he traded for Starlin Castro from the Cubs. The Cubs were looking to give him away. And he jumped in and said, well, listen, you're going to give him away? All right, we'll take him. Aroldis Chapman gets arrested for the domestic violence thing. Nobody wants to touch him. Wait, you know what? You're gonna give him away for very little in return? All right, I'm going to swoop in and get him. Giancarlo Stanton rejects the trade to the Cardinals, rejects the trade to the Giants. He jumps in, sees what the Marlins are willing to accept in return as minimal. He swoops in and he gets it. He is a great vulture, and if you are an adversary of the Yankees, whether you root for the Mets, whether you're a fan of another American League East team, it's got to drive you crazy because it seems every single time there's a chance that somebody could be given up on the cheap, Brian Cashman swoops in and takes them before anybody else can.
I agree with you. I mean, he is as smart as a cookie right there because he just knows how to wheel and deal, and he does it better than a lot of other guys. And you know what? This relates to ownership. Ownership gives him all the tools that he needs to make those things happen. Can you imagine if he was on the Mets? If he was the general manager of the Mets, would he be able to make some of the moves that he's made with the Yankees over the last number of years? The answer is probably no. The bullpens probably the bullpens would approve of a Giancarlo Stanton trade, that we know for sure. And two, a lot of those other things the Starlin Castro trade even a few years ago, they would never approve of that. Going out there and getting a Masahiro Tanaka, they would never approve of that. It's all about having that kind of support group behind you that allows you as a general manager or head coach or manager to make those kind of things happen for your team.
Now, I tell you, two things bother me about this. Number one is the way the Mets are set up, and there obviously is a disconnect from the ownership to the front office. The ownership is saying, hey, we can only do this, and anything that you do has to go through us and has to get our approval. You look at the Yankees, who seem to, even though they discuss things, even though at some points they may have differences in opinions and values and interest in the way they want the organization to go, it seems like Brian Cashman is in there to make the baseball decisions. I don't get that same sense with the Mets and Sandy Alderson. It's almost like he could suggest things to the owners, and it's up to the owners to be willing to accept something. But that's the part that probably frustrates me the most. You have two big market franchises sharing the same big media market, the biggest market in the entire country, and one of them has hired a baseball man, almost a guy that they grew up through their own system, and entrust him with full autonomy in regards to running the organization. Yet the Mets have an executive that probably belongs in baseball's Hall of Fame for everything that he did going back to his days with the Oakland Athletics, the baseball maverick, a guy that has been a successful executive in Major League Baseball for over 30 years. And they're treating him like a kid that, that has to make sure things are okay with mommy and daddy before he can go leave his house.
What other cities does this sound like, John? What other cities does this sound like? Does it sound a little bit like what's going on in the Bay Area?
Yeah.
The San Francisco Giants, who, of course, Brian David, who's been there for 3,000 years, is allowed to do basically whatever he wants. He almost had Giancarlo Stanton stay in the proof of a trade there. And they are willing to go out there and spend money. They have won championships. They've won 3 World Series in the last decade now. They had a big year this year, but I think everyone expects them to be a wild card contender again this year. They'll be back. They have a great manager, of course, in Bruce Bochy, and they are willing to, of course, have a great support staff. You have across the bay a team that doesn't have a stadium. They're playing in a football stadium that is about to be vacated by the Raiders. They're going to Vegas. And they have no support group. They've never had it. The A's have become a farm system for everyone else's team. And Billy Beane, for who gets all the blame, I think more recently than ever before. Remember, he got a lot of credit early on, even to the point where they had a movie made about him with Moneyball. Now he gets blamed for the Panthers, or the Panthers. So looking at something on ESPN there. But the A's floundering in last place and having all their problems trying to develop a baseball team. But he's got no support. He's got no ownership that's going to go out there and make sure the A's are competitive again. When was the last time the A's have had a really good team? You can go back to the Jason Giambi James days. But really, the last time the A's had a great team, you got to go back to 1990.
Yeah.
Last time they were in the World Series.
No, I think if you look at the teams that had Chavez and Giambi and Johnny Damon and Miguel Tejada, the three pitchers, Zito, Mulder, Hudson, I thought they were good then, but that team got destroyed and broken down very quickly.
Always lost to the Yankees in the playoffs, always, all the time.
But I tell you, you bring up a good point. Talking about the Athletics, you got the Athletics situation, you got the Mets situation, and you got the Miami Marlins situation. Do you believe at any point the commissioner Manfred is going to step in and put at least some criteria towards an ownership group, whether it's individually or all the owners out the baseball, to put some sort of mandate as far as having a plan to play competitive baseball? Because in other sports, there seems to be something like that may not be allowed. Perhaps in the NFL, maybe in the NBA in certain circumstances. I mean, is this something we could expect for years upon years? Owners that in some cases don't really have any business in owning a baseball team anymore are just kind of allowed to go in there and do whatever it is that they want?
Well, wasn't that the point of revenue sharing?
That's what I thought too.
Mediocre and bad in small markets to be competitive again. We started to see that with Kansas City, with Pittsburgh, with Tampa Bay. So over the last recent years, we've seen a lot of those teams that were not competitive. Texas be competitive with revenue sharing. So we can sit here and say, well, Bob Manfred needs to step in and do something with the Miami situation. I just don't see that happening. Now, Derek Jeter has not done a good job. I think he's trying too hard to be George Steinbrenner down there. He's trying too hard to be like George. And instead of just coming in and trying to, feel it out and get familiar with the surrounding down there, he's just firing everybody. So he's got to pump the brake a little bit and just let the thing play out. And let that team and try to build that baseball team back up. I don't blame him for trying to reshuffle things. But he could have approached it certainly a lot differently than he has already down there in Miami.
I think he'll get a little bit of a pass here because they spent years under the ownership group led by Jeffrey Loria. Yeah. And baseball in general was hoping that there would be a change. I know they were waiting a couple of years for the owner to sell that team. So I think from that perspective, I do think Derek Jeter gets a little bit of a pass. I do feel bad for the fans of the Miami Marlins, the people in that media outlet down in South Florida, because it doesn't seem like they deserve this right now. That being said, you have the Astros, who went from one of the worst teams in baseball history over a series of 3 seasons, and all of a sudden they're the World Series champions based off of what they did by completely rebuilding, setting themselves up with a very good farm system and striking while the iron was hot. So there is a little bit of a template in place that teams could follow by completely rebuilding and starting down from scratch. I just feel bad for the people in South Florida and Miami. I think these are fans that have been obviously haven't supported the team in drones with the new stadium, but I know there are a lot of fans that have watched this team be rebuilt time after time after time after time. And I think they're probably wondering, when is enough enough?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you can be a Miami Marlins fan down there. I really don't. I mean, it's always build a team up and then break it down. Build it up, break it down. It's just unfortunate for that franchise down there. But they're not moving. I mean, they got that new stadium now. They've had it now for a couple of years. They're not going anywhere. they just need to find some stability down there. I don't know if Don Mattingly is going to be the manager of that team after this season, but they really need to find a way just to get a face down there, get an idea, get some kind of identity, just to turn that around. Because Miami is a good market. I mean, people forget, even when the Miami Dolphins, football, I'm talking about football here, the Miami Dolphins are going well. Miami was a big time sports city. Even with the Miami Heat in recent years, Miami was a hopping city as far as sports are concerned. So if the Marlins ever got good, and I don't mean just with a spurt here and there, like in 1997 and 2003. I'm talking about consistently good at the top of this division. That is a winnable division in the NL East. That would be really good for baseball to have South Beach be a big part of the baseball royalty, for that matter, in line with San Francisco and New York and Boston and Los Angeles. And if you can get Miami to be good, that'd be great for baseball.
I tell you, I look back at what happened in 2012 when they went out there and they signed Jose Reyes and Mark Burley and Heath Bell, and they switched from the Florida Marlins to the Miami Marlins with the new uniforms, the new identity. Fans seemed to kind of gravitate towards it a little bit. The only thing that happened, well, you know what? Ozzie Guillen wasn't the right choice for the manager for them, and they struggled. And once they struggled, the ownership group down to Dave Sampson to whoever was the general manager at the time couldn't wait to break apart the team. And I think they did it for financial reasons there, and they've never seemed to get themselves back from it. The thing that sucks the most is they've had some losing seasons, and they've drafted some good quality players. Of course, losing Jose Fernandez was as devastating of a blow that it could have happened to any single team. But they were building things in the right direction. They had a great youthful young team with Stanton and Ozuna and Yelich and D. Gordon. And it looked like they were just a piece or two away of being able to see the fruits of everything they did build through their front office over the last couple of years. So I see how it's frustrating to all of a sudden say, all right, new owner, this is the way we're going to do it. Derek Jeter and his group has the right to run the franchise however he wants to. That being said, you know what? I don't know how long it's going to be before we see a winner in South Florida. And to piggyback off that point, when are we going to expect to see fans show up at that stadium if it's going to be another 3-4 year rebuild? Because I know it's not going to help from a revenue perspective.
Oh, it's not going to help at all. I mean, they're already having a situation where fans from other teams are coming in there. It was a problem in Pro Player Stadium. It's a problem now. It's going to get worse this year. So you're going to see a lot of Mets fans there. You're going to see a lot of Braves fans there. You're going to see a lot of Philly fans, National. You get the point. Every other team's fans are going to be in that building. You're going to have no Marlins fans there. So they have to establish identity, not just with young players, but prove that they want to keep those players and have a team that's going to be successful in years to come. And that would be the one way to try to generate some true fan base, because I think a lot of fans down there really are jaded. I think they're a little bit jaded. They really don't know which end is up right now with that baseball team down there. And you brought up the uniform. Bring back the old uniform. It's so much better with that.
Nah, I tell you, I look at those '93 Marlins, and what brings back memories to me is how excited I was as a young kid thinking about an expansion Major League Baseball team. And I remember watching the draft on ESPN, the expansion draft, just feeling like I was in a completely different world. How they were identifying two new teams into baseball, which obviously I hadn't seen in my lifetime until that point. But yeah, I mean, I thought the Marlins with the the teal, the way it was set with the white, I thought they were great uniforms and certainly worked and were a good reflection of that region and that city.
Mm-hmm. Think about that. You go back to that expansion era in '93. It's amazing how much better the Colorado Rockies are set.
Oh yeah.
And I know the Rockies haven't won a World Series yet. Marlins have won 2. But the Rockies have so much more stability right now. I mean, going forward, the Miami, it's incredible. It really is. And
it's funny, when they were drafting and they brought in players, it seemed like the Rockies had the better team right off the bat. And I think it was 1995 they made their first postseason, just their third season or the second full season in existence. And, obviously they were built around the high altitudes of Colorado and the Galarragas and the Dante Bichettes and, eventually Larry Walker and Vinny Castilla. So they ended up succeeding initially. The Marlins went out there, won their 2 World Series almost, out of nowhere, especially in 1997. And then in 2003, they had a great World Series against the Yankees, which, you look at the move that Jack McKeon made by pitching Josh Beckett in Game 6 as opposed to waiting until Game 7. And then you have the drop-off where the Rockies, from a farm system standpoint, look very good right now, and I really think have a chance to build from their postseason berth of a year ago.
Oh, they are. I mean, they're going to be a good team. You got Arenado there, who's just a tremendous hitter. I mean, he's going to be, if he wasn't last year, he's certainly going to be this year's. Everyone's going to be wanting to take him number 1 on their fantasy drafts this year because he's just a tremendous hitter. Certainly up there in the first round.
I tell you,
think about that Miami team. I'm sorry, I know you're going to have the name, but think about that Miami team from 2003. I mean, you had Pudge, you had Dontrelle Willis when he was pitching well. You had Beckett, of course, won a World Series in Boston. You had Juan Pierre, you had Michael Lowe, you had all these really good players on that team. Miguel Cabrera, of course, has become a superstar Hall of Famer. I mean, they had so many tremendous players on that team back in 2003.
Yeah, and remember, only a couple of years later, they were trading, Cabrera, and they were trading Beckett and Lowell when they're all relatively young still, before the prime of their career, and it just shows the mismanagement of the franchise or the lack of interest in wanting to sustain some kind of success. It seems like every time they build something good, they rip it apart. To me, that's worse than what's going on with the Mets. I mean, I know you and I are frustrated with what we see year in, year out with the Mets ownership, but man, I tell you, if I was a Miami Marlin fan, I would either hate baseball altogether, or I might put a bullet in my head.
Oh man, don't go there. Don't go there now. Come on.
Obviously, it's a figure of speech there. I'm not being 100% serious there.
But still, I mean, the Mets are enough to drive you crazy. The Mets will drive you to drink. That's what they do. They should change their names. The Mets. They should just change the names to the New York Alcoholics, something like that. New York Alcoholics.
Yeah, you know what? You'll find that their games are brought to you by Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yes, all games start at 1 p.m. So we make sure you drive home safely.
Yeah, they got an Uber driver waiting at the stadium for every fan that's gone to the game.
And then you get in the Uber car, and it's Mr. Met. He gives you the Mr. Met finger. So there you go.
Yeah, Mr. Met's going to be serving beer next year.
I got to get that shirt. You know, I got to ask you though. Are you going down to spring training this year?
I'm planning on it, Mike. I am.
Okay.
I mean, I've made it. I think we're going on about 8 or 9 years in a row. And I'm hoping nothing gets in my way this year, but my plan is to get down there, at least catch a couple games and enjoy, the good weather of Florida while weather isn't so well over here.
Oh, it's pretty bad out here. we haven't had a winter like this in a while, where it's 0 degrees.
Yeah, and it kind of went from pretty decent to all of a sudden, we're talking about 0 temperatures. So, listen, Mike, I really appreciate you coming on the program. It was great getting a chance to chat with you. We'll certainly love to have you on again in the future. Enjoy the football playoffs, the rest of the baseball off season, and we'll definitely talk soon.
All right, take care, man.
Thanks, Mike. That was Michael Cohen of Open Mic. You can catch his program. I believe he's on iTunes right now, so you can check that out. Very good stuff there. We got to talk a little bit NFL. We were talking about the Jets. You look at the way the season was kind of set up for them. The expectations were not so high. And they ended up kind of sucking you in a little bit, where you felt like they had a chance to do something a little more special than they did. They're looking like they're going to be 5-11 this year. It's going to be hard to imagine them beating the Patriots in the last week of the season. Mike and I also talked about the Mets, the ownership situation, which I've touched on a couple times during the week. Tomorrow, stay tuned. We will have Mark Grant, the broadcaster for the San Diego Padres, former Major League pitcher. He had a chance to work with the great and legendary Dick Enberg for a period of about 7-8 years in the San Diego Padres broadcast booth. So we're going to talk about his experiences with Dick Enberg and how we're, the best, some great stories on an absolute legend in the broadcasting world. So God bless you, and as always, I'll see you on the other side.